Yes, yes, yes. Hello and welcome. We are waiting for the stream to fire up on all cylinders, just waiting on YouTube to come on live. As a reminder, we broadcast across multiple different platforms. We want to be where you are. So we go to Twitter, we broadcast on Facebook, and of course, our home base is on YouTube. And it looks like we are now online on all of the different platforms. Hello and welcome. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense lawyer, and today we have another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. This is a show that we do once a week on Wednesdays at 4 p.m. Arizona time to monitor and hold accountable police and prosecutors and judges and politicians and anybody else who's involved in the criminal justice system. We want to hold them accountable. We've been doing this for a long time now. I'm a criminal defense lawyer. We have an entire law firm that is dedicated to helping good people charged with crimes. And you can imagine that in this particular industry that we're in, we see a lot of malfeasance, a lot of misconduct involving law enforcement officials. And so we've been covering this stuff for a long time. But as you know, as you're sort of seeing it kind of spill over into the rest of the world is paying attention too. It started with George Floyd, and it has progressed. We've talked on this show about Rayshard Brooks. We've talked about, of course, George Floyd. We've talked about Ahmaud Arbery. We've talked about Breonna Taylor, and many, many other people. And, as we're going through this journey together, I want to just pause today at the outset of the show and just hold on for a minute. This is a moment in time we need to pause and recognize that we're sort of at the end of an era. Something big happened today, in fact, breaking news, and we want to start on this topic. We've got a lot to get through today, but before we dive into the meat and potatoes, let's take a quick moment to just acknowledge that the Seattle police are now clearing the CHOP protest zone. So if you remember, it used to be called CHAZ, which is a name that I actually prefer. CHAZ is the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. It has been renamed over into CHOP, which of course is the Capitol Hill Organized Protest Zone. And today, the Seattle police actually cleared it out. You can see here that there is a picture of a construction worker who is hauling some of the debris out. If you remember, there was, this all got situated or set up right after the George Floyd protest, about a week, I think, after that. It was around early June when a lot of people just sort of congregated around this one location. They sort of staked out a perimeter over in Seattle, and then they set up their autonomous zone, and they called it CHAZ, and they had their own little sort of like pseudo government that was decentralized, and you had some rules. And it kind of became the spectacle of a nation. And, a lot of people were making fun of it, and a lot of people were really supporting it. And it kind of became this cluster of, really, we don't know what it was, something a little unusual, something maybe people with a little more gray hair have experienced in the 60s or the 70s. But this was sort of a unique thing that happened in 2020. We had a lot of people congregate over to this thing, and it's no more. It's unfortunate that the CHOP, the Capitol Hill organized protest is gone. And of course, we've, as Americans, we've gone through a lot. A lot of people have, we've been through a lot. There's no question about it. And, this is a moment in time that we just want to put a stake in the ground and just mark that we are really at the end of an era. And so let's pay tribute. Let's take a moment of silence in unison for memory of CHAZ and CHOP. Start that over. Sidewalk closed ahead. Look at all those dump trucks coming in, removing the concrete barriers. Cops on bikes setting up cones. CHOP and CHAZ are no more. This young woman, a nice peaceful protester, being ordered out. Law enforcement setting up. and hauling everybody away. And that's it for CHAZ. CHAZ and CHOP, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone Organized Protest Center from June 8th to July 1st, 2020. So that was the end of an era. I mean, we've gone through a lot in this country. We've had, the American Revolution. We've had the Civil War. We've had Vietnam and Korean War and World War II. And, we've really been through a lot. But this is the end of CHAZ and CHOP. June 8th to July 1st, 2020. The end of an era. Now, a lot of people, I'm kind of being jokey and facetious about this whole thing, but this was a big deal for a lot of people. And so, the question is going to be, where does the movement go to, and how is this going to coalesce? What's going to happen with this? Obviously, a lot of people have a lot of angst and animosity towards law enforcement and police, and they want to do something about it. I don't really know what CHAZ was all about or what CHOP was all about. I mean, this started as a reaction to police brutality. It kind of metamorphosized into a racial thing, which obviously, there's a strong component to that with everything that we see about law enforcement and what's happening to minority communities around the country. But then it just kind of evolved into, I don't know what, then it became about institutional white racism and sort of, statutes and correcting the wrongs of white people from the bygone generations and so on and so forth. So I don't really know what happened with it, but there are going to be a lot of people who are displaced. And, one of the things I was really concerned about when we're talking about this entire situation is, what are the police going to do? This show is called Watching the Watchers. Obviously, I've got a lot of problems with a lot of the police and the institutions and the culture and the blue shield and the code of silence and all of those different things. But certainly, there are some good police officers, and there are many bad ones too. And, the question is, well, what's going to happen to them? What are they going to do? The whole world is kind of instituting this backlash against all of them. And what are we going to do with all of the police? So now that we don't have CHAZ or CHOP anymore, my suggestion would be, why don't we just create an autonomous zone for the police officers themselves? So, they're all resigning, they're all retiring, and they're all leaving the force. Budgets are getting cut. We're talking about that on the show today. But what's going to happen to these poor police officers? So I started thinking, all right, why don't they follow the CHAZ and the CHOP kind of framework? CHAZ is, something that was organic. It was a kind of a safe space for the people who wanted to be there. Why can't law enforcement do that same thing? Why can't they create their own autonomous zone? And in fact, I've got an idea for them. They can call it the Special Police Autonomous Zone. So SPAZ, the Special Police Autonomous Zone. Of course, they can just call, like CHAZ, they can call it SPAZ. And then any of the law enforcement who want to go and join this autonomous zone, they can go do it. They can bring their families. They can join the Special Police Autonomous Zone, or they can all be a part of SPAZ. So if there are other officers out there who like the idea of that, obviously I can't take the lead on this thing, but this is an idea for the law enforcement community. You guys can go out, create your own autonomous zone. You can call it the Special Police Autonomous Zone, SPAZ for short, just like CHAZ. And you guys can just bring your families over there and just congregate and get together and do whatever you want to do. If you feel like patrolling your neighborhood and chasing black guys who are running around it, it's an autonomous zone. So, we can't do much in there. If that's how you want to do things, you can go check that out. It's the SPAZ, the Special Police Autonomous Zone. There are a lot of officers who I think who are 100% SPAZ material, 100%. They could fit in to an autonomous zone this way, under this sort of condition. And the first guy I want to talk about, you may remember, we've covered him already. It's Garrett Rolfe from the Rayshard Brooks case. I think this guy would be a great candidate for SPAZ, which is the Special Police Autonomous Zone, of course. Garrett Rolfe was the guy who shot Rayshard right in the back as he was running away. So as a recap, if you don't remember, Rayshard got stopped for a DUI. He was being investigated. And when they were putting him under arrest, they got into an altercation and he ran away. He pointed a taser back. Garrett Rolfe shoots him, kills him, and he's dead. Well, we covered the story about what happened to Garrett Rolfe. He was actually charged with murder, and we've got an update for you on that story. So he has been granted a bond, $500,000 bond with an ankle monitor. The judge said he's not a flight risk. but has no ties to the community. So actually imposed, a sort of a high bond, $500,000 for a murder charge. In my mind, is not super high. Many of those people, many people who are charged with murder are not released on bond. They're not released out of custody at all because they killed somebody. So, when a judge is thinking about whether to release somebody, so when you get arrested, you're going to go into court, they're going to put you in handcuffs, they're going to bring you in front of a judge, and of course, the judge is going to determine some things, and one of the most important things is your release conditions. Can you be released or not? And the judge is going to consider certain things, the nature of the crime. They're also going to look at your criminal record. Do you have any criminal history? They'll look at the sort of your ties to the community. Are you plugged in? Are you planted here? Do you have family? Do you have friends? Do you have a job? And are you a flight risk? Are you somebody who's going to hop on a plane and travel to, a non-extradition country or something like that? These are what they're considering. And so the judge considered that in Garrett's case and actually did grant him bond. So he's got 10 charges. Here's how they break down: felony murder, straight bond, $250,000, violation of oath of a public office, $20,000, criminal damage, $10,000. Aggravated assault for the shooting, $35,000 for aggravated assault on a second victim, and a third victim. So apparently he posted the bond. He got that money, or he got that funding from somewhere, or used a bail bond company, or did something. And he is now out of custody. So he is roaming the streets free. We're going to continue to follow that story along and see what happens to Garrett Rolfe. The other officer who was involved in the case also got charged with a crime. We covered that last week. Devin Brosnan was being charged with aggravated assault and 2 violations of oath of office. So that's the update on Rayshard Brooks. The other ones that we've covered, we're following along. They're all waiting for court dates and so on and so forth. So, there's a lot of kind of activity at the outset of the case. And then criminal courts, it's a lot of waiting, just a lot of sitting around and waiting for new developments to come through. But of course, you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. We're going to follow these cases along, and we'll keep you updated as we go through when there are some substantive things that we need to talk about. So if you have any comments about that, go ahead and throw those in the chat. If you have any questions about how that works, do the same. All right. So now I want to talk about what else is going on in the movements. So as we know, the New York Police Department has been sort of at the vanguard of this thing. The big police agencies like the NYPD, LAPD, the ones that sort of have a long history of abuse or malfeasance, they are catching a lot of the fire because they're so big and there's so many people there. And a new development came about last night. So the NYPD, they were actually talking about defunding the police. So as we recall, after George Floyd, after the Black Lives Matter protests came about, after CHAZ, CHOP and CHAZ were set up, and these protests started sort of coalescing from around the country, we started to ask the question on the show, what do these people want? What does everybody want? I mean, for a long time, I've proposed solutions. I have a whole list of solutions that we've covered on this show, but I just haven't gotten a good sense about what is going to solve these issues moving forward. So in other words, if somebody had a list of everything that we could just go down the list and say, yeah, it's a to-do list, check that, check that, check that, is this going to solve the issues? That would be helpful in moving the ball forward. But instead, what I saw was a lot of just, burning the buildings, looting, breaking things, and causing havoc, which doesn't help at all. So as this whole thing started to progress, we started to see some leadership come about. We started to see some political parties try to jump in and kind of stake their ground and create their claims and capture part of this movement. And what we started to hear was that they wanted to defund the police. That's kind of been the catchphrase that we've been seeing on the news and all over the place. Defund the police has been the big one. And so New York City, or the New York Police Department and the New York City Council, had that opportunity yesterday, and they started it. They started actually defunding the police. Here's what it looked like. So the New York City Council approves a $1 billion cut to the NYPD. And here's some stats that Miss Faith put together. So the city has lost about $9 billion in revenue due to the pandemic, and $1 billion will shift from policing to education, social services, and other agencies. So I believe that the original budget was around $6 billion. And so they're cutting a big chunk of that off the top. You have $6 billion for the fiscal year 2020. And so they're cutting $1 billion off the top of that, which is a big number. You can see here that where is it going to go? It's going to shift from policing to education, social services, and other agencies. The cuts are going to be about $484 million from the annual $6 billion budget. They're going to cancel $1,200 person police recruiting class, stop overtime spending, shift school safety, cut back on crossing guards, and homeless outreach, which is hysterical that they're going to cut back on crossing guards. I didn't realize that they were paying for those things. I thought that those were sort of senior citizens who lived in the neighborhood who just wanted to help, kind of volunteer and help out. But I didn't realize that the NYPD was paying for crossing guards. Doesn't surprise me that the government is going to just, overspend for a bunch of stupid stuff that we could probably, find other people to do. But that's their business, right? And here's the other part of it. The other $430 million will be reinvested in the NYPD's budget into youth and social services programming. So, $1 billion off a six budget. What is that, like 15%? Right around there, between 15-20%, or maybe a little under there. Ryan does all the math at our law firm. I don't do that. So it's right around there. It's a big cut. 15% is a big cut. $1 billion is a lot of money. And I've been very curious to see, okay, well, maybe this is going to be enough. Maybe this is going to be what everybody wants to see. We're talking about defunding the police. The NYPD Council is approving, a major cut, $1 billion. That's a lot of money for a big city. And maybe that's going to be enough. Maybe people will be happy about that. And we can start moving the ball forward on this whole issue of criminal justice reform and race relations and police brutality and all of that good stuff. Well, did it solve the issue? No, it didn't. We have a response to the cuts that it's not enough. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez called the New York City proposal to cut $1 billion disingenuous illusion and insisted on defunding the police means defunding the police. It means we don't want any police anymore, which is, in my mind, AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she's a young woman. She won a primary completely unexpectedly and has sort of risen into the national spotlight in a lot of ways and leading a lot of the charge on sort of this, this left-wing kind of, new type of Democratic Party. She's sort of the face of that in a lot of ways. And so I was really curious on how her and, Ilhan Omar and some of the other ones, some of the people who are far on the left and sort of leading the charge on these reform discussions, what are they going to want? Is this going to make them happy? Or are they serious? Like, do they really want to defund entire police departments? And it looks like that. I mean, it actually does look like that they're basically doubling down on this thing. $1 billion was cut. Not enough. Defunding the police means defunding the police. And Miss Ocasio-Cortez, she just won her primary, so she's going to be back in Congress, and she's going to be leading the charge on this thing. A couple other people, advocates of taking over the PD, argued that the cuts did not go far enough. Rayshard Brooks Jr., who's the former deputy mayor, says this budget is BS. These aren't real cuts to the NYPD and don't reflect a fundamental shift in the nature of policing in New York City. I'm not saying no police, but we need a new approach to policing. This budget was an opportunity to begin that journey, and it fails to do so. Which, I would agree with that, right? I mean, if the NYPD is cutting crossing guards and homeless outreach people who were a part of the NYPD for some reason, does that address the problem at all? Does that, did the crossing guards murder George Floyd or Rayshard Brooks or Breonna Taylor? Did they? No. Did the homeless outreach people? No, they didn't. It was the uniformed police officers. So, of course, I have not read the budget. There's a lot of line items in there. It's a big, complicated thing. But you can see how people are falling on either side of the aisle. New York Police Department, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio says, some people are just never happy. That's it. They're just never happy about anything. And he's right on that. I have not a lot of good to say about that particular mayor, but he's right. Sometimes people are just not happy. And what is going to end up happening, I think, is there is going to be a compromise of some sort. I do not think that the police officers or the police agencies or the departments are going to get away unscathed in this debate. They're going to have to make some cuts and concessions, and it's going to be the same from the other side too. Also from the defund the police people. We're not going to defund entire police departments. It's just not, it's not going to happen. And I don't even know if it should happen. That's a whole separate conversation. There are many good cops. A lot of them are not, but there are good cops. We want to support more of them, and we want to make sure that they have the resources they need, the training, the healthcare, the education, the ability to go do a good job and not be bad popo, not be bad police. So that's my takeaway on it. Of course, Mr. President Donald J. Trump chimes in on this. New York City is cutting police by $1 billion, and yet the New York City mayor is going to paint a big, expensive yellow Black Lives Matter sign on Fifth Avenue, denigrating this luxury avenue. Okay, on and on and on. Pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon. We've heard that a lot. Many of our great police who have been neutralized and scorned by a mayor who hates and disrespects them won't let the symbol of hate be a fix. Okay, so, not really addressing the issue, kind of just going off on a little bit of a tangent there, and he's on the other side of the issue, right? So you've got Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez who says defund everything. You've got Donald Trump who is angry that the cutting in New York City last night was too much. $1 billion, he's saying. Oh my gosh, drastic cuts. And you've got Mayor Bill de Blasio in the middle, just like, hey, we did something, and I don't really know what's happening around here, but we're just gonna continue to move forward. So that's what's happening there. Of course, Mayor Bill de Blasio responds back over to Trump and says that what does he say here? He says, you also don't know that New York's finest are now a majority people of color. They also know Black Lives Matter. There's no symbol of hate here, just a commitment to the truth. So everybody's just dogpiling on each other. And, it is interesting if that's accurate, right? If most law enforcement officials in New York City are actually people of color, and the Black Lives Matter protests and the justice reform protests want to defund the police, then they're defunding jobs for minority applicants. So you can see here what everybody is doing. Everybody's just, I don't think anybody actually really knows what they're doing, quite frankly, but that's okay. They can watch past episodes of the show if they want some answers for that. All right. So let's talk about now, we've got on the show, we talk a lot about bad police officers, bad popo, bad officers, people who are masquerading as good guys, but they're really bad guys. They're doing some horrendous things in our societies, and they're doing it behind a badge and a gun. These are police officers. We've got some really two bad ones that I want to cover today, and they come from our backyard, right here from Arizona. One is from Phoenix, and one is from Mesa. So if you're not really familiar with Arizona, Arizona's a huge state. We have a lot of people. I think Maricopa County is probably the fifth. I think it fluctuates between the fourth, fifth, and sixth biggest counties in the country. You've got bigger counties like LA County and in New York City and some places in Florida and Texas, but Arizona's big. We have a lot of people here. Phoenix is huge, one of the most populous cities in the country. So we've got big police agencies with thousands of employees and thousands of officers. And the first story that I want to go through is from a Phoenix police officer. So the city of Phoenix is the biggest city that we've got here, thousands of officers involved. This guy was arrested, and his name is Sean Pena, and he is from the Phoenix Police Department. Here's his name, Sean Pena, from the Phoenix Police Officer. Now, we don't have his photo. Of course, every time we try to find information about these people, everything is scrubbed. They've got no file photos, no social media profiles. The police don't release anything. It's very difficult to find police officers from some agencies. Some other agencies are very transparent about it. So we have the picture from the Mesa officer, but we could not find Sean Pena. We could not find his picture, and we would like to find that. So if you have a picture and you want to send it over to the show, let us know, because we would absolutely like to see that. This is something that I like to hold up. I have a whole wall back there of mugshots from these different officers. So we'll see if we can track his down. If you have it, shoot it over our way. We'd be really appreciative of it. But here's what happened with Sean Pena. So he was on the force for 3 years, and today he's been charged with crimes. He's being accused of having sexual contact with two people who were in his custody. So this means he's on duty as a police officer and goes and actually arrests people and then engages in sexual contact with them. We've seen this before in other stories. There was one officer from Arizona DPS who I think got charged with 66 counts of sex crimes. So you have these officers who are essentially sexual predators running around, stopping people, arresting people, and then extracting sexual favors out of them in exchange for something, which is typically leniency. I'll take you home. One of those things. It's one of the most horrendous things that I hear about, but it is unfortunately too common. We've covered this in the past. I have other videos on this channel about this type of behavior. So this is not a one-off thing. Now it's not as common as some other police misconduct, of course, but it does happen. And we're going to show you the documents to support that. So here's what we've got now. He's facing 1 count of sexual assault, 2 counts of unlawful sexual conduct from incidents in August 2018, and then again in June 1, 2019. So he has not been arrested or booked, but instead he was sent a summons to appear at the Maricopa County Superior Court on July 17th, which is not super unusual. Put on administrative leave in November 2019, Phoenix PD scheduled an internal hearing so the police chief can determine if he should be fired. So, of course, they've got their due process and they've got their procedures. They've got to go through the things that they have to go through. But he's been charged with some serious felonies. Let's take a look at what they are. So the documents that I'm going to show you are, I believe these are the probable cause statements. So I found these publicly on Twitter. There are some rules about things you can disclose and whatnot. This came from a reporter by the name of News Junkie Jimmy is his handle on Twitter. He's been on the show, Jimmy Jenkins, and he's a tremendous reporter. I get a lot of information from him. He's sort of always at the forefront of these things. So I pulled these photos from him at News Junkie Jimmy if you're on Twitter and you want to check him out. Here's what they say. So I'm going to read through these and spend a little bit of time on them because they're gross. All right, let's look at this first one. So on August 26, 2018, victim, an adult female, reported to the Phoenix police on an allegation of sexual assault by the officer who arrested her earlier that day. She was arrested by Officer Sean Pena for an outstanding felony warrant out of Yavapai County after stopped in a city park after hours. So she's alone in the middle of a city park after hours. Remember, this is 2018. There's no coronavirus, no COVID, none of that stuff. She's out after hours. This officer comes up and stops her. He was the primary unit for the call with assistance from another officer, transported the victim to Southmount Precinct for processing. She says that victim A alleged that Pena forced oral penile sex while she was handcuffed in the back of his patrol vehicle, and they were stopped at the railroad tracks near 3rd Avenue and Buchanan Street. One more time. Victim A alleged that Pena forced oral penile sex while she was handcuffed in the back of a patrol vehicle, and they were stopped at the railroad tracks near 3rd Avenue and Buchanan Street. Raped a woman in handcuffs in the back of his squad car. That's the allegation. Sexual assault examination completed. Evidence sent to crime lab. No DNA profile. It was excluded from the evidence swabs. He adamantly denied the allegations of having any sexual contact with victim A. He also stated that it was victim A who offered him oral sex if he would release her. Video surveillance obtained from multiple locations could not corroborate or refute the allegations. So that's kind of a he said, she said thing, right? You have this woman who claims this happened. He claims it didn't. So that happens in 2018. And it's kind of just sitting out there. They bring him in. He says, nope, didn't do it. He knows that there's no evidence around. He knows that they were in the middle of nowhere. He knows that she's probably got some mental health issues or some drug problems or something like that. You know, just because they didn't find any evidence, there's no reason that he couldn't have used a condom or cleaned up very well or done something. You know, there's a lot of ways that this could have happened. He could have gotten out of it. But what law enforcement traditionally does is when they get a single complaint like this, they don't do much about it. And for good reason, because it is a he said, she said thing. We represent people all the time who have these types of allegations against them. I have had people sort of threaten these types of things against me, not actually make formal claims, but you've heard those, in bad relationships. People say things like, oh, I'm going to call the cops and tell them you did this. It's like, what? And it's a he said, she said thing. You may have been in the same situation. It's not uncommon that people say they're going to get the cops involved for nonsense reasons. Happens all the time. And so when these types of claims are made, when somebody calls the cops and they say this person raped me or he hit me or he did something like that, then law enforcement will go and they'll investigate it, and they can, there's some things that they can determine whether you're being truthful or not. But what they're really going to look for is a pattern. So if this happens again, they're going to bring up the first one. So in this situation, this happened in 2018, and this was one of those times where it's a he said, she said situation. So the cops are probably going to investigate it, have a conversation with her, probably determine she's a little bit, off, and decided that they're not going to do anything with this. They'll mark his file, they'll hang on to it for a certain period of time, and they'll just wait. So I would love to know, more about what this investigation shows, whether they actually did investigate it, what the depth of that investigation was. But if they set that one aside, I can understand that, because it does happen all the time. It happens with our clients. They're under investigation. Cops find out that it was only one incident. There's no other allegations. There's no corroboration. There's no other witnesses. There's no recordings. There's no nothing. It's a pretty weak case. But if it happens again, then they've got a pattern. They start to recognize that this is something that this person keeps doing, and then they're going to act on it. So that's what happens in Sean Pena's case. So on November 20th, 2019, victim B, who is an adult female, says she was sexually abused by an on-duty police officer who had contact with her in June 2019. So she reports this, 5 months later. Victim B says that the officer touched her breasts and had her masturbate his penis when he was alone with her. Victim B was contacted on June 19th for a welfare call check, which was placed on her for wandering around the street near 23rd and St. Anne Avenue. So you see what's happening again? So we have another woman who was sort of just, wandering around, maybe having a sort of a mental health emergency or something going on, or just maybe needed some space, just needed to walk around and get some fresh air. So there's a welfare call. Somebody calls the police. He shows up, and he finds another woman in a very vulnerable position, very similar to victim A, who was kind of doing the same thing. She was walking around in a park by herself, and he went and approached her like the predator. So he does it again in this same situation just over a year later. So she's wandering around. He transports her from that area. So Officer Sean Pena transports her over where the sexual contact allegedly occurred after she was released from his custody. A friend of victim B's was interviewed and stated victim B called her that night and told her some details about the incident. AVL records, which stands for Automatic Vehicle Location Data. So a lot of cop cars, most of them, almost all of them, should have some sort of tracking device, GPS or AVL, automatic vehicle location. It's a little bit different of a tool than GPS, but you can think about it essentially the same thing. You can tell how fast they're going, where they're accelerating, decelerating, whether their blinkers are on, all that type of stuff. You can really get granular about whether they're pressing the brake pedal or the gas and all that stuff. So they look up those AVL records, and Pena's patrol vehicle corroborated that he was at the drop-off location for approximately 10 minutes. No biological evidence was found in the patrol vehicle or upon examination by the crime lab. No other evidence which would serve to corroborate or refute this allegation. Pena denied any allegations of engaging in any sexual contact with victim B. So this is what prosecutors now have to look at, right? I mean, it's kind of a difficult thing to do. I can certainly see where their job can be tricky on these facts, because you've got two people who claim that this one officer did something, and both of them were sexual assaults. Both of them have a lot of similarities, right? Both were women, both were alone, both were wandering around. I'm going to guess they're both late at night. This officer was essentially alone. Sexual contact, no evidence in either case, so there's some good cleaning up going on, and he's denying allegations in both situations. The stuff that is obviously, very bad is that his AVL data corroborates a lot of that. He's got multiple people now reporting him. So he did get charged. In other words, they say that there's enough here to prove both of those cases. I'm sure the prosecutor's offices did their investigations of the victims. They draft this probable cause statement. They turn this in to their superiors. They create these different charging documents, and they look like this. These get filed with the court, and so this officer has been charged with the crime. He's actually been indicted. Again, these documents come from Mr. Jimmy Jenkins, and here's what the indictment looks like. So he's got 3 counts, 1 count of sexual assault, a Class 2 felony, 1 count of unlawful sexual conduct, a Class 5 felony, and 1 count of unlawful sexual conduct, a Class 3 felony. And you can see them all here, right? So these are the different counts signed by a true bill. So this person was indicted in a grand jury situation by the Phoenix Police Department. These 3 different counts, these different violations. So count 3, sexual intercourse with victim B, sexual contact with victim A, another sexual contact with victim A. And finally, we have the signature, the foreperson of the jury is there, and the county attorney who filed it. And that stuff is going to continue to process through the case, through the court system. So Sean Pena, we don't have a photo of him, but traditionally what I would do is hold his picture up and shout at him that you're a bad popo and you should be, ashamed of what you've done. The allegations are there from multiple people. Prosecutors' offices took a review of that and they indicted you. They presented this evidence to a grand jury who reviewed the facts and said, yep, there's enough there. So I certainly agree that this officer deserves a proper defense, deserves due process, deserves to have his day in court, to have a great lawyer, and all of those things. Won't be us, but he can go find his own lawyer and he'll get representation. I'm sure the Phoenix Police Department and their union will probably appoint somebody for him, and he'll be represented as this case progresses. Still a bad popo in my mind. Very serious, very, very disturbing allegations. What really makes it, rape or any of the sex crimes are obviously beyond fathomable. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, murder may be less painful for somebody than being raped and having to live with that for the rest of their lives. I mean, I really have a lot of empathy for that. So what this guy was doing was horrendous. But what makes it worse is he was doing it under the guise of a badge and a gun. He was doing it with power. He was, arresting people, putting them in handcuffs, and then raping them in the back of his patrol car. Allegedly. He has not been proven guilty on that, but I'm going to guess there's a little bit more to the story, and they know what has happened here, and they believe their case is strong enough to move this ball forward. So we're going to follow this along. Of course, this is right in our backyard. The Phoenix Police Department is, miles away from our office. It's really close. So we'll continue to follow this, but Sean Pena is going to go on our list. If anybody in Arizona has been cited or charged or stopped by Sean Pena or had any other types of, things like this happen, if you were stopped by a Phoenix police officer and there was sexual improprieties going on, this guy has been indicted for it and he's been charged with a crime. It may be him. It may be that same cop. And if it is, you've got, essentially you have the right, the ability to contact the Maricopa County Attorney's Office and reach out to them, contact their victims department, find out who is running with the case right now, and tell them you're a victim of the crime, and they'll add charges. They'll find other people. So if you're watching this and you've been sexually assaulted by Officer Sean Pena, or even if you've been cited for something from Sean Pena, your case may be going away because of this guy's malfeasance. So if you've gotten a DUI from him, if you've gotten a disorderly conduct or any of those things, this guy is not an ethical cop, according to these allegations. If he is raping women in the back of his patrol car, probably doing other things bad, specifically related to your case. So when the Phoenix prosecutor's office takes a look at this guy's cases, we may see a lot of those things getting dumped and getting dismissed. So if you've been stopped by this guy, Sean Pena, you now know what to do. But Sean is not the only bad popo that we have in Arizona. We've got another one. Last week was kind of a bloodbath around these parts. On Wednesday, right after I got off the show, I was checking Twitter and I just saw Arizona. I think we had 3 or 4 of 4 different officers resign or get fired or terminated, which of course is great right after I finish the show. That's okay. We saved it for today's show. We're not going to make sure that we don't miss those. All right. So the other bad officer that we have, another very bad popo, is a guy by the name of Nathan Chisler, is how I'm going to pronounce it. Nathan Chisler is a Mesa police officer who was also charged with a crime last week. Now, his situation is a little bit different than Sean Pena's. We do have his photo. I'm going to show that to you here shortly. But he's been charged with aggravated assault after shooting an unarmed man in December. And he has actually been fired from Mesa PD. So Mesa PD has gone through a lot lately. This was all pre-George Floyd stuff. It's kind of before George Floyd and after George Floyd. But Mesa has had a lot of problems for a long time. They had the Philip Brailsford case where they shot and killed that kid in the hotel room. They shot him and executed him, and in my mind, literally murdered him. The cop was acquitted, went through a jury trial, got off scot-free. Mesa Police Department let him go or did something and then rehired him back so that he could collect his pension and then let him go again. So one of the most corrupt just incestuous, disgusting blue shield things that I've ever seen happen. I really would have loved that to happen after the George Floyd stuff because it would have been national news. But of course, this all got swept under the rug. Local news here in Arizona, some national news, but really not a big deal. Already in the memory hole. My point being that Mesa has a lot of problems. And as soon as this guy came across, Nathan Chisler, they fired him right away. They're not playing the waiting game like we're seeing with the Phoenix Police Department where everybody's got to review everything. Allegations are this guy raped 2 women, but we got to investigate it. Mesa Police is sort of catching up now. They're just firing people right away. This is what happened with Nathan's case. So the shooting took place December 2019. He was fired last Thursday. He is accused of shooting Randy Sowell at Ojos Locos Sports Cantina after responding to reports of drunk and disorderly customers. Sewell refused to leave the bar. Officers trying to restrain him when he was shot. He survived because he was just shot in the leg, I believe. I have the Form 4 documents also. He's also charged with aggravated assault and resisting arrest. So Sewell got charged, even though Chisler shot him in the leg and he was unarmed. So this is what always happens, right? The police screw up. They charge the person who was involved in their screw up. We saw this explicitly in the Breonna Taylor case. Remember her? She was in bed when cops, SWAT team came in and started firing bullets, shot her like 8 to 10 times, killed her. And then they charged her boyfriend with a crime for firing back at the police. Remember how that goes? The police can do bad things, but if you do something back against them, they're going to charge you with a crime for that. All right, so this happens with Nathan Chisler over in Mesa, Ojos Locos Sports Cantina. Drunk and disorderly customers, happens every night. Cops show up, and they shoot this guy in the leg. Let's take a look at who this is. Nathan Chisler, badpopo from the Mesa Police Department. You can't shoot somebody in the leg because you feel like it. Let's take a look. Probable cause statement. On December 6, 2019, while working as a uniformed police officer, he responded to the bar. The defendant arrived on the scene and assisted the other officers in dealing with numerous individuals. So the defendant here, normally when you talk about the defendant, you're talking about the person charged with the crime. So that would be like if you got a DUI, you're the defendant. In this case, Sewell was the unruly, disorderly conduct customer. Traditionally, he's the defendant. They arrested him. He's on the defense. They're going to make him the defendant. Here, it's a little bit different. The cop is the defendant. So, all right, let's read it. The defendant arrived on scene and assisted other officers in dealing with numerous individuals related to the call. During the investigation, officers attempted to detain and arrest the victim. The victim is Sewell, who was shot. The victim was non-compliant with officers, at which time the defendant intervened. The defendant, which is the officer, approached the victim and fired 1 round from his handgun, striking the victim in the lower left leg and the buttocks area. The victim was subsequently taken into custody. The victim was not found to be in possession of any weapons. Victim was later transported to the hospital. He was treated for his injuries. Defendant was later interviewed by the Mesa Police Homicide Unit with his legal representation present. So this all happens. The cop is going to get investigated. So Officer Chisler is going to get investigated. He is interviewed by the homicide department. He has his attorney present. The defendant, the officer, expressed a fear for himself and his fellow police officers at the time he discharged his firearm into the victim. The defendant advised that he intentionally fired his weapon into the victim. Based on the defendant intentionally shooting the victim with a firearm, he committed a violation of ARS, which is aggravated assault, which is a class 3 felony. So that's kind of the standard, the standard language that the cops are trained to use. I feared for my life. I was fearful for my life and the lives of the other officers. It's like, hey man, the guy didn't have a weapon. He was drunk and disorderly, and you shot him in the butt. Really, what were you afraid of? There's other officers on scene. This was, a December night in Phoenix. The guy had no weapons, or in Mesa. The guy had no. Okay, so he gets charged. He actually got charged for that, which he should have. I mean, it's not, again, pre-George Floyd, post-George Floyd. Would this guy have been charged pre-George Floyd? If we were still living under those rules, would anything have come of this? So this case got filed on, let's see here, June 24th. So this happened last year, December, but it got filed on June 24th. So here are the actual documents. Let's look. We've got Nathan Chisler, who is the one who's being charged. A direct complaint was filed. Nathan Chisler charging that in Maricopa County on December 6th, he was using a firearm and shot Randy David Sewell, who is the victim. Again, this is all public information. State further alleges that the offense charge is a dangerous felony because it involved a weapon. So this got filed on June 24th. So we see that it happened about 6 months prior to it being filed. So what happened from December 2019 to June 2020? Did anything big happen in our criminal justice system? Well, yeah, everything happened. I mean, the whole world changed in terms of criminal justice. So had George Floyd not have happened, the Mesa Police Department, the Maricopa County Prosecutor's Office, they were sitting on these charges. I'd be very curious to know, was this going to happen anyways? Were they going to charge this officer? Or is this only because of the heightened scrutiny that we're all under, or that the prosecutors and the police enforcement are all under, that I'm putting them under, and that you're putting them under, and that society is putting them under? Would this have happened but for George Floyd? I don't know. Maybe it would have. Maybe it wouldn't have. I can't read the minds of the Maricopa County prosecutors' offices, but I can tell you it certainly feels like a lot more officers are getting indicted and getting held accountable for their malfeasance, for their misconduct. It feels like that to me, which of course is the right thing. So I'm not going to beat them up too badly about doing the right thing, about getting rid of the bad cops, getting good cops trained and equipped, and the mental health screening and everything else that we need to do to make sure that they can do their job appropriately, but also without sacrificing any of the tools that we as a society need to uphold the integrity of our law enforcement systems. And it's going to continue to happen. We're going to see if there's going to be any major policy shifts. As you know, Arizona is a little bit more conservative than some of these other states, so I do not anticipate that we are defunding the police anytime soon. So let me just take a quick pause. Anybody have any comments on anything that we've discussed so far? We've talked about a lot. We're just getting warmed up right now. So let me go ahead and hop on the YouTube chat. If you're on other chats, if you're on Facebook or Twitter or Periscope or any of those things, get over on YouTube, because that's really the only thing that I look for. And it's the only place where I'm looking at chat. So let's take a look quick right through the chat. So we've got Zulu Zite. Disbanding the police is outright insane. This is why people laugh at us. And I actually agree with that. I do agree that it is not a good idea. I do not think it helps at all. The last thing that I want is civilians or citizens with even less training and even more, I don't know, social justice ideas, or balancing things. I don't want to give those people power either. I don't trust those people either. So defunding the police, I think, is not a reasonable, a feasible idea at all, but we're going to see what happens. The Dominic 1011 says, why can't we look at societies before the police? The police were originally formed from the idea of slave catchers, 1829. Look it up. Well, I did that, actually. I was thinking about doing a video on the evolution of the police in general. And I agree with you. Yeah, I mean, there was a time when we did not have law enforcement, and we survived, right? People are here today. We didn't wipe ourselves out, and we survived just fine. Certainly, there are a lot of other things that we, just because that happened doesn't mean that it's the right way to do. There are a lot of things we have in 2020 that we didn't have 10, 15, 20, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, that make our lives better. And so I don't think that law enforcement, just because it sort of was one of those things that came about as society started to really consolidate a little bit more. We moved from sort of an agrarian farming society into an industrial society during the Industrial Revolution, and then we started pooling our resources together. So I don't have to grow my own food. I can go out to a grocery store and pick up my own food, but somebody else grows that. And so as we became more integrated, we wanted to sort of uniformly create a law enforcement system so that we all don't have to think about our own security every day. We're going to create a police force. If it's properly maintained and properly policed, and it doesn't have any of the vestiges of slavery or the vestiges of racism, I don't think I have not heard a compelling reason as why we can't have law enforcement in a society. I think that's a valid thing. It's a legitimate thing for us as people to want, even though it may come out of other, bad roots. So if you think you want to just defund all law enforcement, I'm really curious as to what you think is going to replace that and whether you're going to be compliant with that new enforcement mechanism. There needs to be some sort of force in some way. Otherwise, people are not going to do what they're supposed to do. All right. Question is, are the authorities to be now willing to relinquish having such power to the people? The answer, I think, is a resounding no. I do not think that police or politicians or prosecutors or anybody is giving up any power anytime soon. Whatever's clever, I'm willing to try something new and different. I think many people are. The Dominic's back says, the cases just show why body cameras need to be made compulsory nationwide, worldwide, and turning them off illegal or an instant dismissal with prejudice offense, meaning no more law enforcement employment ever again. Dash cam 2 with audio video. Yep. Yeah, on Dominic's point, that's something I've been talking about for a long time. I don't know why law enforcement agencies around the country do not have them mandatory, do not have them where that you can turn on or off, and really can't enforce without an active rolling body camera. Why is that not already done? These should be in police cars. They should be on dash cams in SUVs and cruisers, and they should be on motorcycles. There's no reason. We have cameras everywhere. We have cameras I'm looking at one right now. It's not that big. We can put these all over the place, and we can really get a good understanding of what happens. We also don't want law enforcement officials talking, on secret channels, texting, using their personal cell phones and those things. We want them to communicate through the proper channels, the proper lines of communication, so that it's all documented, because we want to know what's going on. All right. Rebecca Sowell, prosecutors do not file charges, but they do not dismiss 7 years to charge. So I'm not sure what that means. There is a 7 years statute of limitations in Arizona for felonies. So that means that if you commit a crime, they don't have to charge you with that crime. They can do it all the way up until 7 years later, which happens all the time. It's called a statute of limitations. So they can file those charges at a later date if they want to. They should be live. For the Lady Zaga says they should be live. The body cameras should be live. That would be interesting. I'd be curious to see how that works. Ban encryption so we can monitor what they're doing. And then Rebecca Sowell says back again that defunding is a way to fire bad cops and get rid of the union that protects them. Yeah, I've got a lot of problems with the unions, and we've talked about that a lot on this show as well. I think the unions are a huge part of the problem. All right. So thank you for those comments and those questions. I want to talk about another story here in Arizona. And this came from the city of Tucson. So Tucson is about 100 miles south of the city of Phoenix, also a pretty big town, not anywhere near as big as Phoenix or Maricopa County. But this situation kind of exploded. Not a good situation at all. Just bad all around. I'm sort of hesitant to call these guys bad popo. I think they screwed up. They did not do a good job in this case, but I don't think they're in the same boat as some of the other cops. They're not, they didn't shoot Rayshard Brooks in the back. They didn't shoot this kid in the back. They didn't do anything like that. Now, he died on their watch, and they're culpable for that. My only point is they didn't lean on this guy's neck for 9 minutes. They didn't perform what they should have done correctly, and they need to be held accountable for that. But I don't see the same sort of intentional maliciousness that we've seen with some of these other cops, like in the Ahmaud Arbery case. Retired law enforcement chased this guy down, shot him 3 times with a shotgun. We're not seeing that type of stuff here. Still a tragedy, still something I want to call attention to, of course, because it is in our backyard and because we want to see what happened here. And again, this is one of those cases where the data comes out very slowly. This happened a while ago, and we're just now getting wind of it. This is the transparency that is so important, that is so lacking. When we talk about all of these problems, one of the biggest problems is that these police departments and these unions, they just close themselves up into these little just protective circles, and all they do is just protect each other. The information doesn't get out. Accountability doesn't exist in a lot of ways, and that's the whole point of the show. It's why we're watching The Watchers. Today we're watching Tucson. So in Tucson, this gentleman was killed. 27-year-old died in Tucson, Arizona, after 3 officers held him face down on the ground and covered him in plastic blankets. So this is Carlos Ingram Lopez, 27 years old, killed. He was arrested. The police chief from the Tucson Police Department, Chris Magnus, offered his resignation for failing to disclose the death in time, and that the 3 officers who were involved have already resigned. So there were 3 cops who arrived on scene. The backstory is that Carlos's grandmother called the police saying he was acting crazy. He was naked and he was drunk. This was happening kind of late at night. Carlos had a previous warrant. He had a domestic violence incident, and so he had a warrant out. Carlos, when the police, he's having this incident, his grandmother calls the police. Police show up. Carlos is there. He's naked. He's drunk. He complied with the officers, and when the officers tried to handcuff him, then he began to struggle, right? Which is kind of a natural thing. I talk about this a lot. When somebody's putting your hands behind your back and you're drunk, or just in general, I mean, imagine somebody coming up to you in the middle of the street. You're walking, or you're in your home, or you're doing something like that, and somebody comes. Just picture this for you personally. They take your hands and they put them behind your back like this, and they start locking you up. I mean, you're gonna react. You know, if you've ever been in a fight or not, you know, if somebody's grabbing on you, it's sort of your instinct to just, you know, nudge them back or pull away, or just, you know, tighten up or clench up. And every time that happens, the police will go and they'll go through it, and they'll say something like that he struggled, he was resisting, he was getting violent, he was pushing back, he was doing one of those things. And I've watched many of these body camera videos. I've watched many arrests take place. Even if somebody's not doing much, you know, they're not flailing around, they're not throwing elbows, they're not punching these cops in the face. They're just sort of reacting. They're just, you know, just kind of like, it's not comfortable to have somebody put your hands behind your back. And we are human beings. We have instincts, and people will instinctively react. And when the cops feel that tension, they feel that tightening up, boom, that's it. You resisted, you struggled, you're on the ground, you're getting, you know, stop resisting, crack, crack, crack. They're pulling your arms out, and it's not a good situation. I've seen many of them, and it's not good. People can get very, very quickly injured. So I haven't seen the body cameras. Don't know exactly what happened here, whether it was a full struggle or not, but he did struggle. And during the struggle, police get him down on the ground. He is now handcuffed. He's asking for help. So he's laying in handcuffs on his stomach, and the officers covered him because he was naked. They covered him up with some emergency blankets, and they covered, you know, it's like a plastic yellow blanket. And then they would actually, the story says that they put a spit cover over his face. So what the police have, they have these coverings that they can just put over your face to stop people from spitting and you know, slobbering and all those types of things, which does happen. So then he was kind of held on the ground. He was kind of, you know, laying there, and he's about down there for about 12 minutes is what this article says. And he's yelling this entire time. Can't breathe. He's calling out for his grandmother. Police don't know if he's overdosing. They gave him some Narcan or some anti-opiate drugs and whatever. And so he's there for about 12 minutes, and all this is going on. They call an ambulance. The ambulance comes on scene, or paramedics come on scene, and he's dead. They pronounce him dead on the scene. He had a cardiac arrest. He had a heart attack, and he's dead. Paramedics come on the scene. This 27-year-old kid, who's obviously going through something, is now dead. The grandmother called the police. I mean, you know, she must be just devastated for calling the cops, thinking that they're going to come help, and now her grandson is dead in her garage or wherever this happened. Cause of death was deemed to be sudden cardiac arrest in the setting of acute cocaine intoxication and physical restraint with the cardiac left ventricle, all that stuff. Not good. So, you know, obviously Carlos is not in a good position, right? He's got a drug problem. He's got a mental health problem. He's a young man. He's, you know, in a situation that is not good, and cops show up. He's naked, pin him down. Now there's a lot of debate about, you know, where did the cops screw up? Maybe this guy just had a heart attack because he was too high on cocaine. Well, when you put somebody in handcuffs and you lay them on their stomach and you cover them in blankets and you put, you know, a spit thing over their mouth, people have a difficult time breathing in that capacity. It's actually outside of law enforcement policy. When somebody's got drugs in their system and they're handcuffed and they're on their stomach, it's difficult to breathe. You know, you use your arms when you're laying on the ground to create some space, typically. Like say you lay down on the ground and you're laying like this, right? Your arms are sort of creating some space for your chest to expand and contract. You can breathe pretty easily that way. When you put your hands behind your back and now you're laying flat on your stomach, you can try this. It's a little harder to breathe. If you've got people on your back, it's really hard to breathe. And if you're, in a situation where your hands are cuffed behind your back and you've got other stuff on you and you've got stuff on your face and you're in a very stressful position and you're laying on your stomach, it's difficult to breathe, and he died. So police manuals and police policy, they say you pick somebody up, you put them in handcuffs, you pick them up, you sit them down, you stand them up, you lay them on their side so that the weight of their hands and their arms are not compressing themselves down onto the ground in a way that you can't breathe. And it's good. It's a big part of the reason why I think that George Floyd died, is because in addition to having an officer's neck on his knee on his neck, he was also on his stomach and his hands were behind his back, and you can't lift yourself up. You can't breathe. And so you sort of asphyxiate, you freak out, your heart goes into, rapid beats, and you die. And that's exactly what happened in Carlos Ingram Lopez's case. Now, this happened a while ago, and so we're just hearing about these charges. The Tucson mayor, so the police chief, the city of Tucson police chief Chris Magnus, then offers his resignation. The 3 officers who were at the scene already resigned. The police chief gives his resignation to Mayor Regina Romero, and she issued a statement saying she does not believe Magnus should step down. And again, I can understand her position on that, right? There's some pretty big problems that happen here. These are the cops who were involved: Jonathan Jackson, Samuel Routledge, Ryan Starbuck. They were all there when this happened, and they all resigned from Tucson PD while in custody, while he died, while he was in their custody. So they resigned in April. The police chief says that if the officers had not resigned, then they would have been fired, saying that their actions fell short of departmental standards. And again, it's because this was something that, they basically should have picked him up. Something else should have happened. Medical professionals should have been there. They should have transported him away, but they kind of just let him sit there. And then, they put him in a position that was in violation of their policy, and he died as a result of that. They were in total control of the situation. They, between the 3 of them, you'd imagine they should have known better, and they should have picked this kid up or transported him to get medical treatment. The cops showed up because the grandmother called them to help, and her grandson is now dead as a result of their actions. So, it's misconduct, it's malfeasance. It's sort of a lesser level in my mind because it's not as egregious, but it's still indifferent to human life. It's still not following the rules. It's still bad policing. And so these guys are still going to get the badpopo treatment. They've all resigned. One of the things that I have had a lot of issues with cops resigning is that they're not fired. They haven't been terminated. They all resign in lieu of being fired. Then they hang out for a little bit. This stuff blows over. This time next year, we're all angry about something else, China or North Korea or Joe Biden or Donald Trump or whomever. We're angry about something else when we move on. These guys, they still have a resume of being police officers. They don't have any terminations on their record. So they just go over to a different police department. They go to a different state and they say, I was involved in that thing. I never got fired. I never got disciplined. I never got sanctioned. I never got in trouble. I never got charged with a crime. It's all blown over. That thing is water under the bridge. Therefore, why don't you hire me? I'll just be a cop for your department now. So they resign in lieu of being fired. They transfer over. They get hired, and everybody forgets about it, which is why we always want pictures. We want pictures of these guys so that we can put them up here right there. Jonathan Jackson, Samuel Routledge, Ryan Starbuck. And of course, we want to hold them accountable for their misconduct. Now, the police chief shouldn't resign. The Tucson mayor said that they do not believe that the chief should resign after custody, in custody death. Says that to demonstrate my willingness to take accountability, I am offering my resignation to the mayor, the city council, and the city manager. They can accept it if they deem it appropriate. Less than 24 hours after the Tucson police chief offered his resignation during a news conference, basically the mayor, came out and said, no, we don't need it. We don't need you to resign. And that he's brought forward thinking changes to the department trainings. He's built a strong relationship to our community. So I think he'll stay around. Police Chief Chris Magnus will stay around. It's just more, more police problems. But as I said, we want to keep the good cops, the cops who are willing to do the hard work. We want to keep those guys. It's difficult. They've got a lot of difficult decisions to make. And if they can do it with integrity and they can do it ethically and they can lead the charge and purge the bad people out of their departments, then I'm in favor of that. And that is that story. Well, one more thing. They actually, so this is another sort of mark in favor of keeping the police chief Magnus. So they have already revised their policy. So the Tucson Police Department, they've got a new policy that was just approved yesterday. Tucson police must now notify the public immediately of an in-custody death. They must notify the police immediately of an in-custody death. So this, obviously sudden cardiac arrest for Carlos happened on April 21st, and it took 2 months before the information was released publicly. So you can see here, they weren't released publicly for more than 2 months after he died, even though he died on April 21st. The new policy requires immediate notification of in-custody deaths to both the community and mayor and council, even if the information may be preliminary, similar to other notifications for shootings and so on and so forth. So they're going to notify us. So when they have somebody in their custody and they die, they're going to tell us about it, which of course they should. They should tell us about it so that we can start looking into these things. Remember what happened. We've covered this multiple times, but remember what happens when we don't know what the police are doing and they don't report things to us. Stuff gets covered up. This happened in April. We're just learning about it. George Floyd's case, what would have happened if we never saw the video? Would the public didn't know about it? Would there have been any repercussions for those cops? Or about the Ahmaud Arbery case? Remember in Ahmaud Arbery's case, the prosecutors there, this is not the police, the prosecutors sat on the evidence and sat on the video for almost 3 months before any of this stuff came out to us. Soon as we see it, there's outrage. So we want to see it. We want to see what you're doing so that we can shine the beautiful sunlight to disinfect any of the malfeasance and misconduct that is going on in these various departments. So this is great. Good development. Mayor and Tucson City Council, they're going to notify us immediately when somebody dies in custody. Of course, that is very good news. Okay. All right. So that's what's happening out of Tucson. Now we have to talk about the other big story of our era. And of course, I'm talking about Mr. and Mrs. Rambo. Mr. and Mrs. Rambo, that's right. We've got two people who were in St. Louis, I believe. I'm not sure where they were. I think it's the St. Louis protesters. Look at these two outside of their mansion with an AR-15, and I'm not sure what that other one is. Looks like it would get the job done, but it's a little guy. Nothing wrong with little guys. It's all good. All right, so these two people, Mr. and Mrs. Rambo, we actually call them the McCloskeys. And if you remember, there were protests going on. These two, who I think are actually lawyers, they live in this gigantic mansion, a beautiful piece of property. And Black Lives Matter protesters or protesters from some affiliation were running through their neighborhood. They actually break into Mr. and Mrs. Rambo's private property. They start walking up along their private road, and there's no police and there's no private security, so they grab their guns. And you probably have seen this already. I mean, you've seen the video and you've seen this story, but we've got a couple clips. I want to run through them with you just to catch you up on the story if you're not already familiar. This was kind of an interesting story. It's going to tie into criminal law because, of course, these people who are exercising their rights, there's going to be somebody who's upset about it and they're going to want to charge them with crimes, and we're going to hear from that person shortly. But before we do, let's take a quick look and find out what actually happened in this case, because it is it's kind of comical. All right, so you can hear him yelling, "Get the hell out of my neighborhood."
Y'all can see.
Get out. He's screaming.
He got his rifle. Y'all can see.
Get out. It's private property. It's private property. Keep screaming at him.
As y'all can see. This individual does hold a rifle.
Looks like an AR-15 going on. Different angle, got both of those going simultaneously. He's pointing that gun pretty close to his wife there. You know, that makes me a little bit nervous on that. But that's really about it. I mean, there's not much more to it. You know, they're standing there on the front porch. They've got their weapons. They've got their firearms. The joke from the community of gun lovers, which I happen to be in, is, you know, hey, guys, a little bit more trigger discipline, a little bit more, training on there would be great. But they're in the heat of the moment. You know, this is their property. This is their castle. It actually looks like literally a castle. And they've got these people who they do not know who are coming through onto their property, and they are scared to death, as they should be. You know, they've got a lot of things. They've got a lot of assets. They've obviously done very well for themselves. You can take a position on that one way or the other, that they're too rich and they're too white and they've got too much stuff and they deserve to have that stuff taken from them. If you subscribe to those Marxist ideologies, you're welcome to do that. I personally do not at all. And so if they've earned that property, if it's theirs, they have a right to protect it. That's their sanctuary. So when you have people who come through and break in there, they have every right to grab a gun, every right to stand there on their porch and protect what is theirs. I've covered this on the show ad nauseum too, about how important property is. It's fundamental to so many different things that we do in society, not because it's property. I'm not talking about an iPhone. I'm talking about you trading your life, your labor, to do and create something. And that may be money that you then go buy other property with. So your property is sort of an extension of your life. You're trading your life to earn the money to go buy the property. So if somebody's taking your property away from you, there's a good argument that they're really kind of impacting and impeding your life. They're taking something that you've traded your time to create. They're taking that away from you. And you have an obligation to protect it. You've got a duty to protect it. And you're well within your rights to do it. It's right. It's in our founding documents. So for them to come on there, this couple, in my mind, was within every right of theirs to stand there with their firearms. No legal issues there at all that I can see. And there's some pretty good supporting evidence. So now the question then becomes, people on the other side are saying, well, they shouldn't have pointed their guns and they were far away and they weren't a threat and all those things. And it's like, guys, it doesn't matter. If somebody's breaking into your property, you've got a right to stand there and protect it. Now, the laws are what the laws are in all the various different states. I'm sort of saying this as a prescriptive opinion that I think this is how it should be. Some other states, of course, check your local statutes. Don't go stand on your front porch with a firearm and say you watch this show. Okay, that's not what I'm talking about. But in a situation like this, when you're feeling threatened, whether the law says it or not, I mean, you have a right to protect your life, your family, and your property, your castle, in my mind. And that's exactly what this couple did. So some people are saying, well, they didn't break in, they didn't do any of that stuff. Well, we were looking through it, and it looks like pretty clear that this was kind of a breaking and entering type of situation. Here is the gate that existed before. So they have a private street, access limited to residents, and the protesters just broke it down. They just knocked it right down and they just went right through into this private little residence, into that private drive. And we've been seeing a lot of stuff. I mean, I don't blame these people for being scared. I don't blame them for, getting a little bit loose with their trigger discipline or, pointing the guns in areas that they probably shouldn't have. I understand that. The adrenaline is flowing. They're probably scared to death, and rightfully so, because they've seen what's been going on around the country. People are literally getting killed around the country. Cops are getting killed in these protests. Cops have been shot and killed. People have been shot and killed. In CHAZ and CHOP, I think a 16-year-old kid and a 14-year-old kid were shot. One's dead, one's in critical condition. So you don't know what is happening anywhere. They're pulling down statues. They're lighting, restaurants on fire. The protests are bad. So if they're breaking into your neighborhood and you happen to live in a rich white neighborhood and people are pissed off at rich white people, there's probably a good indication that you should be concerned about that based on what we've been seeing. So if you grab your gun and you want to protect your residents, totally within everything that is right in my mind. Absolutely the right thing to do. I wouldn't fault them at all for that. And I don't think most people do, but there are those people who are just, white privilege, and they're gonna beat that drum to death no matter what the situation. And like anything, what is the government going to do? They're going to get in there and they're going to try to mess this up. As always, they always do this. They want to say that, well, you shouldn't have been pointing at a gun at people, and it's your property, but kind of not really. And we're going to figure out how to charge you with a crime and make your life miserable. And of course, that is exactly what they are doing out of St. Louis. St. Louis prosecutor Kimberly Gardner wrote one of the dumbest things that I've ever seen, for this situation. But here it is. Let's take a look at it. So Kimberly Gardner is working to find charges against an armed couple for intimidation of peaceful protesters. So she calls it intimidation and she calls them peaceful protesters. I just showed you the gate. Was that peaceful or not? Here's what she says. She says, I am alarmed at the events that occurred over the weekend where peaceful protesters were met by guns and a violent assault. What is she even talking about? Did she watch the same video? Did she see those pictures that I saw? Peaceful protesters were walking through private property on a private drive after they broke a gate down. We must protect the right to peacefully protest, and any attempt to chill it through intimidation or threat of deadly force will not be tolerated. My office, currently working with the public and police to investigate these events. Make no mistakes, we will not tolerate the use of force against those exercising First Amendment rights and the full power of Missouri law to hold people accountable. So again, look, if they're on public property, I would agree with that. My understanding is they're on private property. He's shouting it. Looks like it's private property. There's a gate. They broke the gate down. And, this is all subject to change. If she comes and tells me that this guy's standing in the middle of a Walmart, with a gun, that's a different situation. But if he's in his home, and from everything that I saw in that video, he's standing right. He's on his front porch, and then he's basically, right on sort of the eve of his property. So I don't know what she's talking about threatening, intimidating. They broke a gate and they were in an area where they shouldn't have been. He's of course got a right. Hey, you're also talking about defunding the police and the police not showing up. So what is this person supposed to do? Do you want him to call you to come over and help him or his family? Should he just say, yeah, come on into my home, come on in and take whatever you want. Have a field day, have fun. What's mine is yours. It's asinine. Okay, let's hear what she has to say about this. Here is her video. Here's her press release.
Hello, I'm Kimberly Gardner, Circuit Attorney for the City of St. Louis, and I am disturbed by the events that occurred over this weekend where there were peaceful protesters who were met with guns and a violent assault. We must protect the rights to peacefully protest, and any attempts to chill it through intimidation or use of force will not be tolerated. Since learning of these events over this weekend, I've worked with the public and the police to investigate these tragic events. Make no mistake, the Circuit Attorney's Office will not tolerate the use of force or intimidation to affect the rights of individuals to peacefully protest and to protect their First Amendment right. And I will use every extent of Missouri law to hold individuals accountable.
Yeah, okay. It's one of those things, there's decorum between attorneys. You're supposed to not badmouth other lawyers, other prosecutors, other judges, other, the legal institutions. You're not supposed to badmouth them too badly. You're just not. It's kind of just like a professional courtesy. And there's also some rules in the ethical rules, like you're really not supposed to badmouth the courts too much. You don't want to undermine the public's faith in our justice system or in our judicial system. You're just not. It's kind of bad form to do that. But I will tell you point blank that this is one of the dumbest things I've ever seen out of a prosecutor ever. I see a lot of dumb stuff, but for her to go and sort of what she's doing right here is trying to piggyback on a movement. She is saying, that I'm gonna totally exploit this peaceful protest thing, this Black Lives Matter thing, this whole movement. She wants to jump on the back of that movement and ride this thing. And it's overlooking what is actually right in this case. It's overlooking that. And when you see a prosecutor who's making this language, like when they're looking, so she says, make no mistake, I'm going to use the full power of Missouri law to hold people accountable. We're investigating these events. They've got, they're basically unleashing the power of the prosecutor's office and of the investigatory force of St. Louis to go and try to destroy these people. She's looking at the facts of the case. We all saw the videos. Is there a statute on the books that what they did was illegal? If there was, then charge them for that. If there's no inclination of self-defense, none of that stuff, then go charge them. But to come out, make this statement and release a public statement about it and write something in writing and say, I'm gonna go look for something to charge these guys. It's not because they committed a crime. She's not mad about that. She's mad about the politics. She's mad about the just how it looks. And she wants to clap back on it. She wants to smack them in the head and say, you can't do that. And she wants to make a political statement. This is not a prosecutorial statement. These people didn't do anything wrong by almost anybody's account. If they're on private property and there's people breaking into their property and doing Lord knows what, grabbing your gun and standing there, it's pretty reasonable. Most of these cops would be well served to just grab a gun and stand there, but they actually fire them off. These guys had more, this husband and wife had more discipline than most of the cops we've been talking about. And she's going to go charge them with a crime for just protecting their residents. I mean, it's asinine. And, it's one of those things, like I said, you're not supposed to badmouth these prosecutors, but this is very, very, very poor. Prosecutors swear a special oath. They're supposed to just prosecute crimes where there's a crime. I mean, they're supposed to do the right thing and, not file frivolous charges and those things. And this lady is making a political statement. She's not being a good prosecutor. I think she's violating her oath of office, and she should be ashamed of herself. So she's a very bad prosecutor. Kimberly Gardner, very bad prosecutor. In addition to the bad popo, we've got a lot of bad hombres and bad mujeres on the show. Kimberly Gardner joins the Bad Mujeres Club, and I don't pronounce that very well. So that's it for the bad popo that we've got. Well, no, we have even more bad popo coming up. I mean, this show is just a never-ending joy of bad police officers and bad popo, and we still have more to talk about. We're going to go back to Arizona again. The whole country is kind of shutting down again. The media says that Arizona is melting down. We're kind of the hot spot for this whole coronavirus thing. Not going to get into the truth, the veracity of that statement. Everything seems to be pretty good to most of the people that I talk to around here. But again, for politics and because our government just likes to do things, they don't really know what to do. So they just like to go do things. They just say, oh man, I'm getting a lot of heat. Numbers are going up. People are screaming at me on Twitter and I don't know what to do. So I know, how about this? I'm just going to do what the other states are doing. And I'm going to just start passing some more executive orders. So of course, what we have now, Arizona is back on lockdown. We got another 30-day shutdown for bars, gyms, water parks, tubing, and movie theaters. Public events are also banned and in-person schooling is delayed. And so you're probably seeing some of this stuff come back around your home state as well, especially if you're in one of the bigger states, New York, Florida, Texas, I think is a hot spot now. LA, Governor Newsom in California just came out and said they're shutting a bunch of stuff down too. So that's cool. In Arizona, what they're saying is that if you violate any of these orders, then they're going to charge you with a crime, which is why I'm talking about this, right? We're talking about criminal charges and lockdowns. And in Arizona, they're going to charge you with crimes for these suckers. Now, before we move on, I want to point out that they're saying that gyms are the same as a bar, right? So that if you go to a gym and work out, meaning if you go to a health club and exercise because you want to be thinner, be leaner, be healthier, have proper endorphins, take care of your mental health, de-stress yourself, boost your immune system, encourage a better diet, increase your metabolism, any of those kind of things that you do at a health club by exercising, which of course would help keep you healthy and which of course would be good for you, especially if you unfortunately came down with coronavirus. Wouldn't you want to be healthy? I mean, if you're going to go into the hospital, into the intensive care unit, wouldn't you want your body to be in kind of tip-top shape? Wouldn't you want to have a little bit more muscle and a little bit more, strength. In other words, I mean, you don't want to be fragile going in if you're going to contract the coronavirus. You want to be healthy. You want to be able to fight this thing and combat it back. But for some stupid reason, our governor and many other governors have added bars onto the same list as, gyms to the same list as bars, water parks and tubing, and movie theaters. So places where people go to actually take care of themselves, they want to shut down. Now, obviously, the reason I'm spending time on this is because it really angers me. It really angers me. Fitness is health. If you're fit, you're going to be healthier. One of the biggest causes of death, of mortality, one of the biggest factors is obesity. Look it up. Obesity, look on any website, obesity is a contributing factor to death in coronavirus. And for good reason, right? You have too much weight on your body. You cannot breathe. Most of the people on ventilators, I think, are all over, or not all of them, but predominantly overweight because they have a difficult time breathing. So if you lose some weight and take care of yourself, you're going to contribute to a healthier society. You're going to be less susceptible to COVID. You're going to be one of the people who is less likely to go into the ICUs and decrease capacity, take up a hospital bed. If you're healthy, you're not going to be taking up a hospital bed. So it's so important that people exercise. By the way, it's 110 degrees out in Arizona. We can't go outside for a hike unless we go at 5 a.m. Okay, we can't go do these same things that you people in California can do, running around on the beach and stuff. We don't have any of that here. We need our gyms. We need our health, clubs so that we can go and take care of our bodies. It makes us stronger and safer. It's better for us. So, of course, what do the governments do? They shut down the gyms. They say, you people can't go do any of that stuff. They want to shut down the churches, shut down the gyms. But if people are protesting on the streets, we're going to let that stuff slide. Instead, they want some of the healthiest people in the world, people like you and me who exercise and take care of our bodies. They want to tell us we can't do that anymore. Nope. You have to stay home. You have to lock yourself up. You have to go get your Cheetos and your Funyuns and just sit there on the couch and watch Netflix all day. You don't get to go exercise and be healthy. So, huge problem. I could rant about this for another probably 20 hours because it bothers me so much that they're taking away stuff that is good for people in the middle of these difficult times. It's a huge, huge problem. Fortunately, we have some people in Arizona, and I'm going to suspect this is going to be happening throughout the rest of the country, who are really getting tired of the shutdown stuff. Okay, we all shut down at the outset. No question about it. I was on board with that. We CDC, governors, everybody comes down. President Trump, we're on a national emergency, national lockdown. Everybody locks down. Okay, cool. We don't know what this thing looks like, and we don't know how to handle it. So we're just going to close down. We're all going to just make the sacrifice, and we'll figure something else out to do. All right, we did that. Now they want to sort of do this whimsical. Some stuff's open, some stuff's closed. So now what the gym owners are saying, and a lot of these bar owners and some other people, there are people protesting the masks, there are people protesting the bars. I don't have a dog in that fight. It's the gyms, because gyms provide value. They provide health. They provide people a way to become a better version of themselves. We want more of that, especially in a pandemic, not less. But to equate a gym with a bar or a water park is just asinine. And it doesn't make any sense. What can you catch at a gym that you can't catch at a restaurant? What can you catch at a gym that you can't catch at Home Depot or Walgreens or Walmart or a protest? Nothing. It's totally arbitrary. So my point is, when the government wants to step in and tell you to do something that is arbitrary and has no rhyme or reason, what do? Most of us, because we're just small people, we do what the government says. We just get in line. Fortunately, people are getting pretty tired of that, and I'm included on that list. I want to talk to you about a guy who's in Arizona who runs Mountainside Fitness, and his name is Tom Hatton. He's the CEO and founder of a gym here. I think there's 19 locations here. I actually go to this gym, and he says that the health clubs are going to be open. So on, I think it was Monday or Tuesday, the governor came out and issued his order and said, we're closing gyms. Same day, Tom Hatton comes out and says, no, we're not. We're staying open, and we're going to file a lawsuit against the governor, and we're going to stay open until we hear back on that lawsuit. So I was basically doing some serious fist pumps when I heard this statement, but I want to show it to you.
Taken this situation, this virus, extremely seriously and tried to handle and maneuver an employee base of just under 1,500 people and keep them employed for the last 2 months and the months going forward. My call today to have you all here isn't just about health clubs, it's about business and civil liberties. Today the governor chose to close movie theaters that are currently closed. He closed tubing that is open once a day, and he chose health clubs. This could be any business, anytime, anywhere. I challenge anybody at this point to walk over to Home Depot, to go to a casino, to go to a liquor store, or to a restaurant and have dinner. And let's all wait for that decision. I asked the governor, where's the proof that this decision came from any evidence of what's happening in any health club here in Arizona or across the country? I am here to announce that we have filed suit against the governor, effective tomorrow morning. I have partners in the health club industry that will be joining the suit. We have contacted and been in contact with the Goldwater Institute. We are not taking this decision lightly. We were asked to close in 5 hours and asked everybody to go home and to go worry and to be afraid of the next decision and the next business that'll be arbitrarily closed. If the governor is serious about what is going on, then I say to Governor Ducey, close everything. Don't choose, don't make an arbitrary decision on what you think will look good to the media. You make a decision for everybody's life together. And we'll be in full support of that, just like we were for the 2 months that we were closed down.
Right on, Tom. Yeah, so I totally agree with that. I mean, at some point, enough's enough. I mean, you can't just, the guy's got 1,500 employees. He's got like 19 locations. He's doing more to help people get healthy than basically any other type of industry or type of company, other than health, of course, other than healthcare providers, other than doctors, nurses, and the people who are on the front lines. He's helping more people get healthy than my law firm is. That's for sure. He's helping more people than a restaurant get healthy with his health clubs. So he's doing a pretty good thing. And for him to have 1,500 people and just get a call or hear it from the press conference and saying, hey, you got to close all your shops and you got to let all your 1,500 employees know that they're not coming into work tomorrow because 5 hours ago, in 5 hours, we're going to release an order that says you're closed. Like, that's insane. I mean, again, this goes back to the property stuff. This guy has a private business. He's got his own company. He's got a gym that is on his private property, that is his facility. I'm a private citizen. I know the risks of COVID. I know how this all works. I know where I live and the people I interact with and how this all works. Myself and my firm, my law firm, we're all taking the very stringent, very strict requirements. We're following all of the regulations, following all of the rules. That being said, if I want to go to his facility, his private facility, and work out there, I should be free to do that. We've already agreed. I've already done the total lockdown, but now for the governor or for some politician to tell me that the gyms are unsafe, but the grocery store is safe, or the gyms are unsafe, but Home Depot is safe, or you can go to a restaurant, or you can go do this or that and the other, but you can't go to the gym. It's arbitrary. It's not fair. They're taking away this man's right and his ability to earn a living and people's ability to go and exercise just arbitrarily. They're just pulling it out because somebody thinks, I haven't seen any data or any evidence to support that this is like a hotspot for where people catch coronavirus. Every time I've been in this facility, in this gym, they have social distancing, social spacing. They've got somebody going around. They literally have these tanks of normally we'll use them for like spraying pesticides and stuff. They have it filled with sanitizer. They're just spraying down everything in there. It's the cleanest I've ever seen it. It's the safest place that I know of because it is so damn sanitized. My whole point is this guy is finally standing up for something that a lot of people are feeling, and he's got a lot of resources. He's got 1,500 employees. He's got probably $100 million business. And so he has the resources to go fight this thing. We've got some big people like the Goldwater Institute and others who are leading the charge on this. But think about all the CrossFit gyms. Think about all the private small gyms and all the personal trainers and everybody who's involved in that aspect of the health space who is now being told you don't get to open your shop. People are really upset about the gym thing because they think it's just a bunch of Instagram bros out there just throwing weights around. But I will tell you, it is people in there who just want to get some exercise. That's it. And listen, There are going to be repercussions for this. There's no question about it. We're already seeing them. Okay, this is why I'm talking about it. So we just heard the statement from Tom Hatton. Well, guess what happened last night? The Scottsdale Police Department went over to one of the facilities and actually charged the COO, which is the Chief Operation Officer from Mountainside, Mario Arce, or Arch, with a misdemeanor. So this came from a tweet from Wayne Schutzke. Scottsdale PD cited Mountainside Fitness COO Mario Arce with a misdemeanor after the gym's location refused to close in line with the governor's order. So they actually went over there and they said, hey, you guys got to shut down. And they said, no, we're not going to do it. So they charged him with a crime. The Scottsdale Police Department charged the COO of a gym with a crime for having his gym open. Many people are thrilled about that. And they're like, wow, that's great. You know, it's great. He's in violation of the law. Yes, technically he is in violation of the law. There's no question about it. So is every employee. So is every person who's going in there. The gyms are supposed to be closed. We're still using them. Technically, I think we're in violation of the law. I haven't read the order and I haven't litigated this case, but this is the first one that I've seen of somebody being charged as a company, as a person on behalf of a company being charged with a crime for not following the governor's order. Scottsdale PD has already filed this charge. Now, I don't know what's going to happen with the Scottsdale prosecutor's office. I don't know if they're going to run with this. My guess is they are. They're probably going to back up their officers, and a decision has been made to go and enforce these things and close these things down. Again, it's probably political. It goes back to the city council, goes back to the mayor. They've made a decision that they're going to go enforce these closures. So they're probably going to take it and run with it, and they're going to prosecute this guy with a criminal charge. It's probably going to be a class 1 misdemeanor, which is the same classification as a DUI, and this is the COO of Mountainside who's going to have to face that and move forward on it. You can come to your conclusion on that, whether you think that's the right thing or the wrong thing, whether that's a good use of police or law enforcement time or not. In fact, if you're in the chat, in the comments, I would love to get your thoughts on it because I want to sort of wrap up with this topic. What are your opinions on this? Should these gyms shut down? Should they stand their ground and stay open? And if they stay open, should our law enforcement, should our police officers actually be charging these people with crimes? I will tell you this. I was at a different location. I took this picture this morning, actually. So I was there this morning. This is a Phoenix police vehicle that's just passing by. 2 cops came in. I was working out. They came in and they said, they didn't talk to me, but they were talking to the people up front who were like 16, 17-year-old kids, you know, just kind of poking their heads around, looking what's going on here. And they didn't do anything. So they showed up, wanted to see what was going on, got in their car and left. Phoenix PD, Scottsdale PD actually charged the COO with another violation of it. The violation of the executive order. Again, today, so I posted on Twitter, the empire strikes back, right? The gyms are standing up. They are the resistance. They're standing up, and the empire is coming back hard today. So the Scottsdale PD charged the COO, and then the State of Arizona Department of Liquor Licenses just actually revoked or suspended 2 other gyms. So there's 2 other gyms in Arizona, Lifetime Fitness. They may be in your state also. Really big, like country clubs. They've got everything, hair salons and kid centers, and they've got food courts, and they've got liquor. They sell alcohol. They sell booze. So you can go do some bench press, go downstairs, rip some shots if you're into that. Well, their liquor licenses are getting pulled also. So the Arizona suspends 2 liquor licenses at the Lifetime Fitness Biltmore location after it remained open in violation of the law. So other gyms are now following suit. Lifetime, there's others. I have a list of them. Director John Coca announced today Arizona Department of Liquor Licenses and Control summarily suspended 2 liquor licenses associated with a Lifetime Fitness location right there. So they're going to pause operations. They're going to stop selling alcohol. And some people are saying, well, yeah, good. That's great. They deserve it. And this is a major penalty. And it's like, guys, if they're closed, they're not serving alcohol anyways. So what's the big deal? Great. Okay, cool. You're going to pull our liquor license. So if we would have closed down and not sold any alcohol, we would have kept our liquor license, which we need to sell alcohol, but we're not selling alcohol. So if we open so that we can sell alcohol, you're going to pull our license and we're not going to be able to sell alcohol anymore. Okay, so like what? All right, so that's what's happening with our government. The gyms are standing their ground. They're fighting for healthcare. They're fighting for fitness. They're fighting for people to be healthy. The government is coming back and saying, no. We're going to leave all of this other stuff open, except for you guys. And because you're taking a stand, now the politics, the pendulum has to swing back, and they got to come and they got to stamp this stuff out. So they're going to charge the CEO of Mountainside with a crime. They're going to limit the gyms or the liquor licenses for lifetime. And there are just others that are joining in on the fight. And so here is the list of everyone else that we have identified, or this came from a news article, but these are the gyms that are staying open in Arizona. And you'll notice many of these are actually national brands. So these may be staying open in your various cities and states if they're not already open. But they're making a stand, and they're saying that the government is being arbitrary. They're being capricious. They're selectively enforcing certain businesses. They're picking winners and losers, and you can't do that. The government can't say, we're going to close everything, but we're only going to let hair salons stay open because the governor's got a big investment in a hair salon, or something like that. That's speculation. I don't know if that's true or not. But if that were the case, right? If you had somebody who was investing in one particular industry and they closed all of the other industries and kept one industry open, they could effectively, enrich themselves or that one industry at the expense of others. So government's not allowed to do that. They're doing it here, and these gyms are just having enough of it. So Mountainside Fitness, Lifetime Fitness, Orange Theory Fitness, Reform Pilates, F45, which is a big, I think, Mark Wahlberg investment company, Yoga 6, Body Lab, all of these other gyms are all staying open. And I couldn't support them more, quite frankly. Catching some heat on it from some people in Twitter and other social media platforms, but I couldn't support it anymore. I would encourage everybody to get healthier. One of the ways to do that is by going to a gym. Now, of course, you want to be smart. You want to sanitize and keep your distance and make sure you're not inhaling from other people and create some space. But guys, this is life. This is real life. I know it's a scary world out there, but exercise and your health is important. If you think that you're just going to sit this one out and take 4 months off from health and exercise, you're going to be dealing with those repercussions for a very long time. So big double thumbs up to Tom Hatton and all of the other gyms who are staying open. I will be continuing to support you now and into the future, and hopefully all this stuff blows over soon enough anyway. So that's the news. That's what we've got today for the show, and we've got some time left for some comments. So let's see what else is going on here. We had some people who've got some comments since we last checked in, and we're going back to the story about the Mr. and Mrs. Rambo. And here's what we've got. We've got a lot of comments that came in. All right, so Lady Zaga is back, says, wow, I'm not impressed. It's 2020 and they now make a common sense policy, which is true. The Tucson City Council just passed an ordinance to stop people from filming the police. Don't get too excited about the mayor and the chief. Okay, yeah, that's a great one. Tucson City Council just passed an ordinance to stop people from filming the police. Wow, I did not see that one. So we're going to have to cover that next time. Yeah, huge problems with that. And I actually think that there's going to be some constitutional problems with that too. I am hopeful that by the time that moves forward and it makes its way up in the courts, that ordinance gets invalidated. All right. If you have to legislate common sense, you've got bigger problems in policies. Matri, that's a perfect example of why armed cops should not be the default go-to for societal disputes. We need an alternative, a peaceful moderator industry to step in simple disputes between citizens. Okay, so Marty Winkler is here. So she has a comment. Everybody join our group on Facebook, Phoenix Police Violence Victims. So sure, happy to plug that. If that's a Facebook group, go check that out. Ahmad's case, from Rebecca Sowell. Ahmad's case, nothing happened until a white lawyer made the video public. He was not an attorney for Ahmad. Retracted message. No one is going to defer to an arbitrator without some kind of looming potential penalty. Cameras and social media is protection. I agree with that. We can call for help. Okay, so now we've switched over to the Mr. and Mrs. Rambo story. The protesters were on their way to the mayor's house, and the dumb guy was pointing his rifle in his wife's direction. Yeah, I noticed that, and that comes from whatever's clever. Yeah, I noticed that, and I was wondering what that was all about. You know, sometimes you've heard of those things like a Freudian slip, right? When you're talking and you say something like, you use somebody's name in out of context, and it shows that you have a crush on that person, right? You say, oh, she's got this. I'm trying to think of a movie it came from, but it's not appropriate for YouTube. But my point is, right, is when you're doing something that you don't really notice you're doing, is there some truth to that? Like, why is he pointing a gun at his wife so directly, like not even thinking about it, you know? I just thought it was kind of funny. Glad that they're safe. Glad that they stood their ground. I need you to shine light on my horrific assault by Jason Gillespie from the Phoenix Police. So that's from Marty Winkler. So we'll see if we can connect offline. Dumb to put themselves out there. They could have been shot and killed. Yes, it was for protection, but not she's for protection, but not unsafely. And yeah, they could have been absolutely killed. No question about that. They can stand on their own lawn with whatever they want. That comes from Zulu. Manza Sheik Zulu. I was proud of that couple as an American. Yeah, I was pretty proud of them too. I thought it was a courageous thing they did. I mean, it's a scary situation, and it takes some gall to go out there and do that. And people are not. What I like about it is that they were not accepting that they were hopeless. People do that all the time. They think they have to have the government to protect them from everything, every labels and expiration dates and bubble wrap on this and warning signs and all of this stuff. And the government's not there looking out for you. You got to take care of yourself. And these people just, when they thought they were under threat, when they thought they were under duress and facing potential violence, they took care of it. They just went and got their firearms. They were prepared. They stood on their own ground. You know, this is not unlike other times in American history. People have done this